Digital world, it is time. After months and months of alluding to doing something along this regard, way back in the first couple of weeks when I said that I was going to devote a whole month to this topic, to my top 10s where these movies have been popping up frequently and with great enthusiasm, to just general comparisons to these movies in general, and because it's time for another top 10 list. That's right, Spliced In Later is about to give you Jordan's top 10 MCU films. And if you're unfamiliar with what MCU stands for, as I discovered on the weekend when I was talking to my mother about MCU, and she had to stop me and ask, what does MCU stand for? Well, MCU stands for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, before I get into it, I'm just going to let a few ground rules down and a bit of explanation for why I'm doing this top 10 and why I'm so excited about doing it. As I've watched more and more films, and through the years of my life, I've gone through phases of things that I am excited for the most, whether it's the Star Wars franchise, Lord of the Rings, Batman, Star Trek, Jason Bourne, The Matrix, Indiana Jones, Back to the Future, The Karate Kid. There have been several different franchises that when the new movies come through, I'm excited to watch them, and I go through moments where I think, yeah, these are the shit. These are good movies. However, it's probably around 2011, I think, when the official Marvel Cinematic Universe was getting off the ground, where I think I realized that this was the thing for me. This might be my favorite of all the franchises within the movie world. Why is that, you ask? I know a lot of people think that superhero movies are a bit inferior to other movies, that they're not real movies. Whole different explanations for why a superhero movie shouldn't qualify as a good movie or your favorite movie. Well, I mean, that's a fair assumption, I guess, because before the MCU, we had tons of superhero films coming out. In 1998, the movie Blade started a revolution for modern-day superhero films, but with varying degrees of quality. You got some as great as Spider-Man 2, and you got some not so great, like Elektra, unfortunately. What makes the MCU great and why I like it so much is because of its ability to achieve what no other movies had really achieved before, which is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. To make a whole bunch of movies that can stand on their own, can do their own thing, but are part of a bigger world where they can reference other films, bring in other characters in a seamless way, in a way that's not jarring, that's not confusing. This was a concept that wasn't really possible apart from the standard versus movies, like Alien versus Predator, that sort of thing. Back in the day when the first Iron Man movie came out, Nick Fury, played by Samuel L. Jackson, was thrown into that movie in a post-credit scene just for fun, just to go, hey, imagine if Iron Man went on to go and join the Avengers and have this big team-up movie with all these other properties that we've got coming out. And it built. It went from that one little, here's a little joke moment, to, well, okay, maybe we can unite these guys just for one film. Let's give them all their own solo films with the illusion of a bigger plan. Then we'll get to the Avengers, we'll bring them all together. After that, who knows, maybe we might build to something else. But we'll take it in steps, we'll test the waters, we'll try things. And from there, from 2008 to 2019, I can't really say 2020 because thanks to the current crisis that's going on, we just haven't had any more movies since 2019. There's been an established world where all these superheroes have their own franchises doing their own thing, but they're able to come together into the Avengers movies to save the day and also to cross over into each other's movies. You've had Hulk hanging out with Thor. You've had Captain America fighting Iron Man. You've had the Guardians of the Galaxy all the way up in space come hang out with Ant-Man for a bit in the most recent Avengers movies. Crazy stuff. What's great is that they're all different as well. The concept can't really go stale because each movie is a different genre, trying different things. So you can like some movies more than others. But in general, I do believe that the MCU has not made a bad movie. Maybe a couple of boring ones. I'm not sure. When I get to my honorable mentions later, I think only 2 films will not be mentioned, which I guess goes to show that while a movie can't be bad in the MCU, in my opinion, there are some that are just a bit average compared to the quality of some other films that just keep that fire out of the gate with just impressiveness from start to finish. I love worlds that are ever expanding. I love characters, keeping track of characters, and the way the Avengers handle themselves is just impressive, with an ultimate goal in mind as well. They don't mind taking their time to build the characters up to these ultimate goals. Yes, we want to have a big final Avengers fight against their ultimate villain, but we're not going to put that in the first or second movie and jump right to the end, which unfortunately I believe is what went wrong with the ill-fated DC cinematic universe, having Superman and Batman meet and fight immediately in their very first movie and then jumping straight into a Justice League movie without having actually met any of these other characters. It can work as long as you're not rushing it, and that's what I think MCU's done great. I realize what I'm doing. I'm falling into a tangent. I'm falling into my love for MCU, and I realize that these top 10s take a long time, and I'm already wasting a lot of it just gushing. So let's jump right into the top 10s. I will say, as per the usual ones, that my top 10s will be different than other people's. Mine are heavily biased. Mine might be predictable, especially if you've heard my top 10s of 2017, 18, and 19. But who can say? There's going to be a lot to talk about here. Some movies might get discussed a little bit less than other movies because I have maybe already discussed them in other top 10 lists. But rest assured, all these movies are great. I love them all. If I could, and I had a spare few days where no one needed me, I would sit down and I would binge watch all these movies back to back. And that's not even including all the TV shows on Netflix and ABC and the web, comic books, everything that's just made this world such a fun, wonderful place to check in every couple of months. But enough dilly-dallying, enough oozing how much I love this stuff. Let's get right down into the countdown. Let's begin with number 10. If you're familiar with me, you've already heard about it. Black Panther. Well, the fact that Black Panther is only number 10 and Black Panther has been very high on my top 10 movies of 2018 just shows you how much I love these movies and the quality of them per se. But Black Panther came out in 2018. I'll give you a quick recap of each movie. Black Panther stars T'Challa, the Black Panther, who of course was introduced in Captain America's Civil War a couple of years previously, once again showing how MCU plans out its characters and events long before the movies actually take place. He is the superhero Black Panther, so we don't waste time with the standard origin story. He has to return to his home country of Wakanda, which is its own little kingdom full of technology and wonder that is just hidden away from the rest of the world. The rest of the world thinks of Wakanda as this third world country. Oh no, they've got flying spaceships. They've got amazing nanotechnology, crazy customs and tribes that are just leaps and bounds ahead the rest of us. He has to return home and assume the throne as king because of his recently passed father. However, it's not an easy transition. His rule is being challenged by other tribes, and most importantly, a mysterious man called Eric Killmonger Stevens, played by Michael B. Jordan, who returns to Wakanda to challenge T'Challa for unknown reasons. Why is Black Panther good? Well, Black Panther is the 18th film in the saga of the MCU films. The 17 films had come before it, and it was able to show that not only can they still do really great solo films, they don't have to rely on 3 or 4 more Avengers characters to make a movie good, but also that there are still so many parts of the MCU world that you can explore that we'd never heard of before. And that's what's great about it. It's the vibrancy of the Wakanda world. I love watching the film and checking back in with the Wakanda people and the Wakanda way of life. Full of bright colors and incredible chants and customs, technology, belief. It just looks incredible. Our opening stuff is basically just T'Challa returning home and just getting back into the swing of it with his mother and sister and friends. So you go through the whole, he's becoming king, let's take him to be crowned, does anyone have anything to say about it? And you just see all the different tribes with their colors, with the way they do things. Everybody operates very differently. Some tribes have embraced technology more, others choose to regress into the mountains as is the old way of life. It's so unique and so interesting to see how this kingdom operates. T'Challa is very likable. He's played by Chadwick Boseman, who was relatively unknown, I think, before he took on the role. I probably had seen him in TV episodes before I saw the movie, and that's how much I didn't really know, because I certainly didn't recognize him when I saw him. The movie's great also for its villain. One could argue that MCU's only real flaws is terms of building up its villains. A lot of villains are one note, one and done, just to be knocked out of the way by the end of the movie. Very few villains have had the exception of growth and depth. Loki is an example of one that is not, as is Thanos from the Avengers movies, and Eric Killmonger is also one of them. We see Eric Killmonger's origins, We see his drive, his motivations, and Michael B. Jordan plays him with such an intense ferocity that you sort of start to side with him, and you do see where he's coming from, and you're interested to see if he's going to achieve his ultimate goals. Black Panther's only real downside is, of course, its CGI is a little silly towards the end of the movie, but that is a very small, minuscule part, and at that point, you're so taken in with everything that's going on, you just don't care. Aside from Black Panther, my favorite characters in here as well are Winston Duke, who plays M'Baku, a rival tribe leader, Martin Freeman as CIA officer Everett K. Ross, who's just sort of along for the ride. He doesn't really know what's going on, but he moves with it. Okoye, T'Challa's head security guard, and his, of course, amazing sister Shuri, who's basically the Q to his James Bond, providing him with all the gadgets and Black Panther equipment needed to save the day. Black Panther was also huge in terms of steps forward for African American culture and black cinema and all that stuff. Nominated for an Academy Award for a lot of those reasons. Very well deserved. I was always excited to have Black Panther join the world. The movie did not disappoint. Not only did it show that Black Panther was a great character, but his world is amazing, something we had not heard about before in the MCU, and I'm excited to see if we ever get back to the movie theaters where Black Panther 2 will take this world. Black Panther, number 10. Coming in at number 9, a bit of bias, but who cares? It's my list. I can do what I like. It's Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, of course, Spider-Man has been in the movies for some time before he officially joined the MCU in an illustrious deal between Marvel and Sony, which until recently nearly fell apart. But luckily, we still get to keep Spidey around in these movies. He's had a solid couple of movies with Tobey Maguire in the role in the early days. He's had even good movies with Andrew Garfield, an animated movie, Into the Spider-Verse. Spider-Man movies do vary in quality, but as a genuine Spider-Man fan, it's very hard for me not to enjoy a Spider-Man movie. However, I will say watching Spider-Man Homecoming, that Tom Holland's portrayal of young Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, is probably the most accurate to the comic persona that has been demonstrated for him for so many years in the comic books. Basically, Peter is Spider-Man. Again, we don't need to worry about an origin story, so that's great. He's just coming off of Civil War II, so he's been introduced to the world of the superheroes, the big time, mainly Iron Man, and he's waiting for his call up to go save the world again. But until then, he's just trying to get through life. He's just trying to go to school. He's trying to ask the girl that he's got a crush on to a dance that's coming up. He's trying to keep food on the table for his Aunt May. He's trying to keep his secret. So not too many people find out. People have a habit of finding out that he's Spider-Man though. And of course he ends up fighting a villain. Our villain in this movie is the Vulture, played by Michael Keaton. Another great example of a villain that gets some depth and backstory in the MCU world. Because basically the Vulture is an everyday normal guy. He was just a construction worker in the background of everything going on in the world of the MCU. Because when you think about it, a lot of these movies involve towns and cities being destroyed. We don't really think too much about the little people underneath. We only really started thinking about it from Civil War onwards. For a series of events involving Iron Man and other Avengers and attacks on the planet, Vulture, Adrian Toomes, is out of work and he's just trying to make money and also put his family through life and also try and get on top of just the changing world around him. So using stolen technology from previous Avengers missions and other things going on, supervillains, superheroes, he leads his little thief squad, just stealing stuff, selling weapons, getting money. I love the movie. I love seeing Spider-Man grow as a hero as he tries to take on the big threat that is the Vulture. Before the Vulture really shows up on scene, he hasn't really had a villain to fight. You can't really count Captain America and Co. in Civil War because that was just, a dispute between friends. But Vulture is someone that is willing to kill Spider-Man if he gets in his way, and he's smart, he's cunning, he can outthink Spider-Man at every turn. And Peter's not used to the world that he is in. He's not used to saving people, so he makes a lot of mistakes. Tom Holland plays him with such earnest, with such desperate need to save the day and help people. You love him, you want him to succeed at every turn, and it's hard to watch him fail quite often. And that's what's impressive about it. Fair enough that Spider-Man's in the MCU and he's able to stand on top with the likes of Iron Man and Captain America, but just through life itself, he has to stand on top with previous Spider-Man portrayals. He has to show that he's just as good as Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield and everybody else. He has to answer the genuine question, has Spider-Man become stale? Can we have more Spider-Man movies? More Spider-Man solo movies? And the answer is, you bet, of course we can, absolutely. I know some people that did not care for Spider-Man movies, didn't really like him in the beginning, didn't care too much about it, did not share my excitement that Spider-Man was joining the MCU. And I can honestly say, having had discussions with them recently, that they love Tom Holland's Spider-Man, they like his movies, they like him in the world, they appreciate him. And that's a lot to do with Tom Holland's portrayal of Spider-Man and, of course, Spider-Man Homecoming, number 9. Coming in at number 8, this movie would have to be in the top 10 list somewhere because without it, there would be no MCU, Iron Man. Iron Man came out when there was no plan for an MCU. It was just, we need to make another superhero movie. Who haven't we done yet? I know, let's give Iron Man a try. There you have it. Iron Man was the first movie made by Marvel alone, without really relying on other companies to buy the rights to their characters. I believe Paramount was involved, but not to a huge extent. This was a time when we'd already had a trilogy of Spider-Man movies, a trilogy of X-Men movies, a couple of Fantastic Four movies, Hulk movies. A lot would argue that nobody knew who Iron Man was, and I would admit that I didn't really know. I went to the movie theater just with a couple of friends to see a movie. Iron Man, he might have been in a couple of Marvel fighting games that I had as a kid. Iron Man was great because of one person, and that's Robert Downey Jr. His portrayal of Tony Stark, aka Iron Man, is nuts. It's like the two are one and the same. He makes Tony Stark a lovable, snarky billionaire playboy who has a smart answer for everything that's going on, very adaptable, very smart, able to talk himself out of any situation, but also can't stop himself from talking himself into trouble. Iron Man is basically the beginning of everything. Tony Stark is a billionaire weapons manufacturer, sells weapons to people. Enemies get their hands on their weapons, and for a series of events, he is captured and held hostage by terrorists, and in order to escape, he uses his technology to build an Iron Man suit. And from there, it's just building on that technology, making better Iron Man suits, as Tony Stark himself starts to realize that the person he was before, his actions, his motivations, not good, and he has to make up for it, in his mind, by saving everybody as Iron Man. The villain of this movie is Obadiah Stane, Ironmonger. Is basically the opposite of Iron Man. A lot of these movies are generally, in the beginning, the exact opposite fight. So an Iron Man fights another Iron Man, a Spider-Man fights another Spider-Man, X-Men fight other X-Men. You get the idea. He's likable though because it is Jeff Bridges in the role. Jeff Bridges is a very charming individual who we all know from The Big Lebowski and other great movies. He is very sinisterly evil. You know immediately that he's the bad guy, but he's got such a lovely smile and there's a wink to him that you still hope maybe, just maybe, he's not going to turn out to be a prick. Unfortunately, he does. Iron Man's feel and theme fits with director Jon Favreau. It is a simple origin story, but it is entertaining to watch over and over again because it is so likable to see the transformation of Iron Man from Mark 1 to Mark 2 to Mark 3, so on and so forth. And of course, though they didn't realize it at the time, they're building on these little MCU characters. You throw in Tony's best friend Rhodey, who was played by Terrence Howard in this movie, who of course will eventually transform into Don Cheadle and War Machine. You've got Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts. You've got the AI Jarvis, and what he eventually comes up becoming we all know, but I won't spoil in case you haven't, and maybe you're thinking, perhaps I'll watch some of these MCU films because Spliced In Later won't stop talking about it. I hope you do. It's worth a look. Without Iron Man, there would be no MCU. Without finishing the movie and the people behind the scenes going, man, I wish... You know how Nick Fury kind of looks like Samuel L. Jackson in the comics? He's the one who potentially puts together the Avengers in a lot of the comic book origin stories. Wouldn't it be fun if he shows up just for a few seconds to name drop the Avengers and then leave? And Samuel L. Jackson goes, yeah, I'm down for that. Whatever, I got a spare half hour, let's do it. Without that simple throwaway joke that built into whatever we're in now, we wouldn't have these amazing summer blockbuster Avengers movies that we've been getting. That is all down to Iron Man. That is all down to Robert Downey Jr. portraying a very likable first original character. Jon Favreau's directing. Top notch, 100%. Love Iron Man. Number 8. Number 7, Marvel's first risky maneuver, some would say, taking a not well-known comic group and putting them on the big screen with a risky director, risky actors, the whole thing. Turns out, 100% success. Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy, I know a friend who saw Guardians of the Galaxy probably 6 times in the movie theaters. It is a great, funny movie. One could argue it's a comedy film, it's a comedy sci-fi film in my opinion. A sci-fi western, a road trip, a team-up movie, whatever you want to call it. It basically stars Chris Pratt as Peter Quill, a human bounty hunter in space who calls himself Star-Lord. He's after this artifact called the Orb, which turns out a lot of people want. Everyone's racing for this thing. And he encounters a few other different people. Zoe Saldana as Gamora, a lethal assassin. Dave Bautista as Drax the Destroyer, a very literal behemoth man. A tree called Groot. And a raccoon with attitude called Rocket. These are a bunch of people that hate each other. They don't really get along. They don't want to spend time with each other. But for a series of events, they end up forming a little family, which they call themselves the Guardians of the Galaxy. And their ultimate goal during this movie is just to get their hands on this orb, to make money, and to not let the really evil people have it, who obviously their intention for this orb is to destroy everyone and everything. It is an absolutely hilarious movie. There is not one point in this movie where you're not laughing. Mainly due to James Gunn's directing. He's got some comedy timing with these characters, which I think works tremendously, and also the way each actor takes on their role and makes it their own. Chris Pratt, he's very good at playing that lovable dork, and that's exactly who Peter Quill is. Dave Bautista, the wrestler, hadn't seen him in too much stuff, but he's made Drax his. If anyone else played Drax, I don't know. I don't think they'd be very good, just because we've had Dave Bautista. Vin Diesel and Bradley Cooper, they're only providing voice and motion capture, but they still put enough attitude and character into their roles that you truly believe a tree is a real-life creature, and a raccoon that could talk would probably swear and want to build bombs and steal people's eyes. And of course, Zoe Saldana, she's amazing as badass Gamora, who can flip all around you and cut your legs out from under you. You never even know she was there. It was our first look into the cosmic part of the MCU. We could leave Earth and go into space, and not specifically Asgard, and meet all these different aliens and their society and what they're doing up there. Ravagers, bounty hunters, policemen in space, cities built in giant skulls of former all-powerful alien beings. It is a very funny movie, but it has a lot of heart. So to the point where everybody starts to grow as a team and start to really care for each other, you are there with them. You are there along for the ride. You're hoping that they put aside their differences and genuinely become a great family. Everything all culminates into a big sci-fi battle, as it always does, but the ultimate goal is the Guardians of the Galaxy are formed. And they took their time as well. They didn't rush off and join the Avengers immediately. They're doing their own thing. They had their own movies. Even involved in the Avengers is in small doses, which is great. I think if you are new to MCU, perhaps Guardians might be your first look, just because it's not too serious. It's just a bit of fun. It doesn't require you to know too much about other MCU films to get what's going on, which is great. Guardians of the Galaxy, number 7. Number 6, surprising that this one is down at number 6, but that's just how great these movies are. The Avengers, of course. The movie that started everything in terms of the team up. Who'd have thought that you had 3 separate movies, one about Iron Man, one about Thor, one about Captain America, also one about Hulk maybe, and you thought, let's bring them all together into one specific movie that flows as a story that unites them all as a team against a common enemy. You have a great film in The Avengers, mainly because everybody is so good as their characters. Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Chris Evans as Captain America. Mark Ruffalo is fantastic in the movie. He hadn't been Hulk before. He had to prove to everybody that he could take on the role of Bruce Banner, and he was lovably likable in this movie. Great comedic timing, able to prove that he could be meek little Banner, but also smash everything Hulk when the time came. And then you've also had Scarlett Johansson and Jeremy Renner as Black Widow and Hawkeye. Not superheroes, but good enough to hold their own fighting alongside these guys. They have to come together because Thor's evil brother Loki has returned on Earth, and he's got an ultimate power to lead an invasion to destroy the world. And that's pretty much what it takes for all these superheroes to come together, is an all alien invasion assault on the Earth that one hero cannot handle alone. It's impressive that these characters, who had been in their own movies and had not interacted with each other, have such a rapport with each other. Iron Man and Cap, immediately they're arguing with each other, they don't like each other's methods, but you can tell that they will eventually grow to become good friends, which is incredible that these actors had not met. There was no ultimate goal for anything for them beyond the Avengers, and they were able to still make that repertoire with each other. Great stuff. It was very worrying going to the Avengers. You thought maybe too much star power, too much superheroes, too much story going on. It flows seamlessly. Whether that's due to director Joss Whedon, whether that's to Kevin Feige and the script writers on the other end. Maybe at this point there was the ultimate goal of maybe after 23 films we'll get to this final resting point that the series started to laser in on where they wanted to go. Who can say? But it's just entertaining. It is fun to see everybody together. It pays off after about 5 or 6 years of just constant build-up that this movie was coming. Great action, great comedy moments, great spectacle, great side characters. Everybody has a role in this movie. No one feels like they're just standing there because they need to. Even Clark Gregg as Agent Phil Coulson from S.H.I.E.L.D., who just shows up in these movies a lot just to wink and say, yes, I'm from S.H.I.E.L.D. He has a very important role in this movie that is both hilarious and devastating and worth a look. A lot could argue that, yeah, sure, the Avengers was big, but now where are we? We're nearly 8 years since that movie happened, and in comparison, it's minuscule. But the Avengers was the one that said, yes, we can do it. Without the movie, there wouldn't be no team-up movies in the future. There would be no expanding universe. There would be no gung-ho that we can just keep adding character after character and that everybody can still work together and blend seamlessly if the Avengers had not been a success. I love the Avengers. I love to rewatch it. It is charming to look back and see where the team originally began, where everybody was before they grew to where they are now. It's good to see Samuel L. Jackson get to have a really good role as Fury. I will say that a lot of the movies that he's in them, he doesn't really get to do that much. Seeing him take center stage and bring everybody together is worth all the cheeky 9 or 10 100 appearances that he's made in other movies. Avengers is great. Love it. But there are other films that I like a little bit more. Shockingly. So let's move on from number 6, The Avengers. Alright, number 5. We've mentioned this one before in our top 10 movies of 2017, and that is Thor Ragnarok. Why is Thor Ragnarok so good? It's just funny. That's really what we need to say about this movie. Directed by Taika Waititi, who might be one of the funniest guys on the whole planet. Thor ends up on a gladiatorial planet with the Hulk and his brother Loki, fighting to stay alive, to get back to Asgard and protect it from his evil sister Hela, who has come back to cause Ragnarok, which is the destruction of Asgard. Very simple plot. Very simple premise where the stakes are so high, but the threat is so not there, essentially. Ragnarok is the end of the world for Asgard. It's it. If Ragnarok is achieved, that's it for everybody. People are dying. Characters we've met in other Thor films are dropping like flies. But we can't stop laughing because we're watching Thor get his hair cut, spar with the Hulk, who just wants to sit on him, with Jeff Goldblum being the most Jeff Goldblum-y he could ever be as the Grand Master of these fights. Ragnarok was great because, yes, the other Thor films are good. One Thor film is better than the other one by far, but Thor itself, the world, is a place I like checking into for sure, and I do think Chris Hemsworth does a good job as the God of Thunder. But I think what Ragnarok discovered is that Chris Hemsworth has comedic chops. He has great comedic timing, and Thor probably works better when he's being a bit of a dude, being a bit of a silly person who can make cheeky sideways about what's going on around him. He can still laser focus in and do what he needs to do to save the day, but perhaps it's best if he's not taking it seriously while he's doing it. In fact, Chris Hemsworth is at his most funniest playing Thor when Thor is going through the most horrible stuff that's ever happened to him, whether it's Thor Ragnarok or later movies as well. Everybody in this movie is funny. Tom Hiddleston is hilarious as Loki, who's gone through a bit of a transition from the evil character we met in the original Thor film. You can certainly relate a lot more to him now, and he's got more of an easy ally to Thor than he's ever had before. We get to meet Valkyrie, played by Tessa Thompson, a badass Asgardian who maybe could go ahead and be the new Thor. If Chris Hemsworth ever decided to depart, she could definitely hold her own franchise from what we're going on here. Mark Ruffalo embraces his comedy as weird Hulk fighting man in this. And of course we get our little cameos from Korg, the rock monster, Taika Waititi, possibly the funniest character ever, as I've mentioned before in my top 10s. I'm not going to talk too much about Thor Ragnarok because I went into quite a big detail in the top 10s of 2017. You're welcome to go back and have a listen to that. But suffice it to say, Ragnarok is so funny, hilarious, a great time, so much laughter for such a serious, terrible thing that's happening in Thor's life. Taika Waititi is great. I cannot wait for the next Thor film. Basically, just go watch Thor Ragnarok and you will not be disappointed, for sure. Thor Ragnarok is number 5. The reason why I blew through Thor Ragnarok is because this episode will be long, and I apologize for that. We're stretching it out. But I've gone into a lot of detail into the movies that I have not discussed with you before, and the top 4, some I've mentioned to you before, some I haven't. If it feels like I'm speeding things up a bit, sorry, but let's just get to the end while it's still the same day that you started listening to this episode. Coming in at number 4, Captain America, the Winter Soldier. The movie that proved that you don't have to have the same type of genre for every Marvel Cinematic Universe film, because this is basically a political thriller. Cap is working for S.H.I.E.L.D. He's going on secret clandestine missions for Nick Fury with Black Widow by his side. He starts to suspect that something is off, something is not quite right with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s intentions and missions, which of course leads to him having to go on the run to uncover the mystery, all while being hunted by a mysterious assassin called the Winter Soldier. Also during this movie, he meets Anthony Mackie's Falcon, who becomes like his new best bud, and by the end of the movie, he's basically trying to save the world from a sinister evil that's been brewing unknown to the world for some time. This movie proved that Chris Evans, as Captain America, Cap is not just a one-note patriotic superhero. There is depths and layers to him. He believes first and foremost in good, and it doesn't matter if it turns him against people who believe they stand for good, if it's America, if it's Germany, if it's S.H.I.E.L.D., if it's the police, whatever. He's out to just protect good, truth, and the American way, essentially. It is intriguing and interesting to see the evil concept that's going on in the movie. It is played out in such a way that your mind sort of explodes when you realize what's been going on. The Winter Soldier, his origin story is great as well. The Falcon is a great addition as just a flying guy. He's fun. Black Widow is good to have something more to do in a movie that's not just to be overshadowed by the Avengers. And of course, with Robert Redford appearing in this movie, you start to realize that even the big actors who you might consider would not consider doing a superhero movie are considering getting involved. He's a very interesting character called Alexander Pierce, basically like another Nick Fury sort of thing, and he's great in the movie too. Winter Soldier is a nail-biter. It is interesting. It is edge-of-your-seat action from start to finish. We open with Cap taking out a ship of pirates single-handedly, and by the end of it, he's on exploding helicarriers, jumping around 50,000 feet in the air. Winter Soldier, I believe, is probably the first time we look into the dark side of the MCU, that things aren't as squeaky clean as we like to think they are, and we're going to go from here basically downhill. We're going to go down to quite some despair before we're able to pick ourselves up to the heights of the original Avengers. I can't talk too much about Winter Soldier because I don't want to spoil the plot if you've never seen it. I know some people that have fallen asleep every time I've tried to show them the movie, so I hope one day they do sit down and watch it from start to finish. It is so good. A lot of people would argue, and they might be right, that The Winter Soldier is the best MCU film, but again, this is my list, and it is a very biased list. And there are 3 other films that I just like more because of me, my personal tastes, and just my love for being entertained by seeing what I want to see on the big screen. But that said, Winter Soldier is so good, by far, great quality from the MCU world, directed by Anthony and Joe Russo, who eventually went and directed all these other movies that I'm about to mention. Captain America, the Winter Soldier, number 4. Coming in at number 3, Captain America, Civil War. Why do I like Civil War more than The Winter Soldier when one could argue that The Winter Soldier is a better made movie than Civil War? Because Civil War takes all the characters that we've met from all the other movies, Iron Man, Hawkeye, Vision, Scarlet Witch, and basically throws them in for a big fight against each other. but it's a fight that's not straightforward. There's a point where you can't really take sides because it's such a messed up thing that's going on. Basically, what happens in Civil War is, after a series of events involving the Avengers and collateral damage, the government's bringing in the Sokovia Accords, which basically means that the Avengers answer to the government. They go where they tell them to go. They don't go if they're told not to go. Iron Man's all for it because of some serious issues that's going on. Captain America is not. And that's basically it. Things start to spiral. They try to reason with each other. They can't see eye to eye on this one. Captain America starts taking drastic action. Iron Man takes drastic action to stop him. And by the end of the movie, all our heroes are either on Team Iron Man or Team Cap, which eventually leads to a big brawl, essentially. What makes the movie so entertaining is that Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans, as I mentioned back in the Avengers where they didn't seem to get on, they are playing a point where, yeah, they get on each other's nerves, but they respect each other and they do consider each other friends. And to see their friendship fracture in such a way is hard to watch, but also very entertaining. They both have good reasons for their stances. It's very hard to go, yeah, I'm on Team Tony or I'm on Team Steve. You find yourself flipping back and forth between the movie because of the things that they encounter and their stances. And it's interesting to see all the characters take different sides because, again, because we've had so many movies to build on these characters and their development, it's interesting to see which side they take. And you worry when they start punching each other that they might actually hurt each other. And of course, Daniel Bruhl is in here as a character called Zemo, who is kind of manipulating things from the wings. He's a very interesting villain. His motives are very interesting, and it's exciting to see what they'll do with him if he ever does continue on in the MCU. Of course, while Civil War juggles all these characters we've already met before, they also introduced into the mix, as I've mentioned before, Black Panther and Spider-Man. Seamlessly. They're not thrown in there and you're like, I don't understand why this character's here. Black Panther has quite a substantial role in the plot. Spider-Man is there to sort of even out the numbers, but his introduction, his reasons for being there, makes sense. Even Ant-Man, who we just met in his own movie the year before, he's in the movie and it makes sense. It shows that apart from our original Avengers we've met, we can throw in anyone really that we've introduced and we can make it work, which is just great. The fight itself between the superheroes is one of the most entertaining moments on the big screen I've ever seen. The ultimate end result of this, how the MCU world is like once this movie's over, is tough to watch but very interesting, and it led to a very interesting world that everybody else inhabited as we went forward in time. Civil War is so entertaining. It is a very long movie, but it flies by because I just enjoy it so much. I love everybody in it. I love Cap. He's a great character, and I think his trilogy is one of the strongest in the MCU. Civil War, number 3. All right, number 2. Our top 2, you've probably guessed them by now, but which one's going to be 1 and which one's going to be 2? Again, it's probably obvious. Let's just jump right into it and stop stalling. Number 2, Avengers, Infinity War. Infinity War is great. It could also be number 1, but again, bias, me knowing what I want, what other things happen, how things react, sometimes it just takes a good conclusion to trump another movie. But to take away nothing from Infinity War is an opening, amazeballs first part of a story where, again, we've got even more superhero characters all spread across the known universe, and basically all they have to do is take on this one guy called Thanos. But what Thanos wants to do is he wants to get the 6 Infinity Stones: power, time, mind, space, reality, soul, put them all together and reshape the universe in his image. Wipe out half the universe, essentially. Everybody's split off, they're having their own little skirmishes, but they're interacting with characters they've not met before, and each time they can't seem to one-up Thanos, to a point where eventually they have to dig in deep together and fight off a wave of terrible Thanos followers and desperately try and stop him before he achieves his goal. The movie's exciting because everybody is reacting off each other, and again, it's not messy. It all makes sense. It's good we get Doctor Strange added to the mix. The Guardians finally join the fray. The stakes have never been higher, essentially, and it does not disappoint. Anthony and Joe Russo, they directed Civil War. They come in here for Infinity War. The build-up is great. You watch it knowing that it's going to lead into a second part later on, but it's still edge of your seat excitement to see when the movie's going to hit its climax. And even though things are so sinister and so dire, comedy is great. Everybody has great comedic moments. They work off each other well. The snarkiness between Iron Man and Doctor Strange is great, and I want to see more of that. Captain America doing his own little thing with a cool beard and a different type of shield. We get a fight in Wakanda, which as I started off this list, I said Wakanda's a great place to be, to actually be fighting in Wakanda. Incredible stuff. And of course, an overall over-the-top, terribly devastating climax resulting in a cliffhanger that was an unbearable year to wait to see what the resolution was. I can honestly tell you, if this crisis had happened in 2019 and had delayed the conclusion to this story, I would be an utter wreck. Infinity War is so entertaining. Even before the sequel came out, you could still watch it without needing that second part because it's just a good story. It does have itself a sort of ending, very definitive ending, which is terrible to watch, but you can't look away. Infinity War, again, some could argue that Infinity War is better than the other one, but this is my list. That said, Infinity War, due to scale, size, enjoyment, appreciation, gotta be number 2, Avengers Infinity War. And before I jump in and say number 1, which I will surprise nobody with it, of course, I'm just going to roll off a couple of honorable mentions. There are only 2 movies in the MCU that don't make an honorable mention, not because they're not good, they're just fine, essentially. I have to stop the honorable mentions at some point. See if you can guess which 2 movies didn't make the cut. The Incredible Hulk cuts a lot of slack, but I did enjoy the first Hulk film. I think it's got a great story, good music. Edward Norton is an interesting Bruce Banner. Thor, our first introduction to Thor with Chris Hemsworth. I love Asgard, I love Loki, I love the adventure that Thor goes on. Captain America, the first Avenger, very cool, going back to World War II, seeing Captain America's origins. Great music, Chris Evans kills it as Captain America. Iron Man 3, I really like it. Shane Black is one of my favorite directors. It's notorious for having a very infamous twist, which I personally like, but it's okay if some people don't. Avengers, Age of Ultron, the weakest of the Avengers films, but it's always good to see everybody back together and we get to meet some new superheroes like Scarlet Witch and Vision. Ant-Man, pretty simple heist movie, but Paul Rudd really kills it as Ant-Man, very likable superhero. Doctor Strange, cool seeing the magic side of the MCU, and Benedict Cumberbatch again shows why he was a perfect choice for Doctor Strange. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, more shenanigans, more comedy, more silliness, perhaps a little too over the top, but we get some more Guardians added to the team and a great villain in Kurt Russell. Ant-Man and the Wasp, another little fun comedy team up where we get Wasp joining Ant-Man, played by Evangeline Lilly. Stakes aren't particularly high, but it's a fun look. Captain Marvel, Brie Larson takes on probably the most powerful superhero in the whole MCU, and it's interesting to see her origin story, as well as basically the origin story of Nick Fury. And Spider-Man Far From Home, one of my top movies of 2019. The fact it's only receiving an honorable mention shows how great these movies are. Tom Holland kills it, Jake Gyllenhaal is great as Mysterio, and it is currently the last film we ever got from the MCU until we're allowed to go outside again and watch movies. So you probably guessed, maybe you've guessed what movies were left off the honorable list, and you probably know which one of them was, and you probably know it's number 1, so you're just saying, just get on with it, finish it up, wrap it up, Jordan. Alright, fine. Number 1, Avengers Endgame. I can't describe how much I love Avengers Endgame. It is my number 1 favorite movie of all time. And I think it's because not only does it take things back to basics after the big extravagance of Infinity War, we go back to our original heroes, the original Avengers team. Not only is it interesting to see them pull themselves up out of the gutter that they were left in with Thanos trampled all over them, not only are they able to come together as a team and rediscover their teamwork and unity, not only do they look back on their own lives and we get to see how everybody has evolved over all the movies, not only are so many characters thrown into the mix, again working seamlessly into the plot that no one's just there for a gratuitous cameo. What makes it great is that not only is it a good conclusion, it is a strong conclusion, it is an entertaining conclusion. A lot of people would argue, and I probably would agree with them, that Game of Thrones was a great show, but it's marred by an ending that was unsatisfactory, and as a result, it's hard to look on Game of Thrones as a whole and think it's good. If Endgame hadn't had an incredible, over-the-top, amazing, action-packed finale with a very satisfying conclusion that made sense for the character directions that everybody was on, perhaps it wouldn't have been my favorite film. But it did. It stuck the landing. So it's going to immediately be my favorite film of all time. It's good to watch it and remember where I was in 2008 when I first saw Iron Man. See how far we've all come, how far I've come in 11 years to finally get to this point after waiting for so long. I will never forget sitting in that cinema, watching the big climactic final scene. I won't mention what it is. At this point, you'd have to be living under a rock to not know what it is. But seeing it, all the things happening, I felt great. I felt so happy watching the movie. And that's what we're after in the end. It doesn't matter if other people tell you that movies you like aren't good or you shouldn't like them or whatever. If you get that sense of joy, that sense of excitement and appreciation for something you're watching, embrace it. That's incredible. That's what you deserve. You deserve to like something with all your heart. No one can take that away from you. And for me, it's Avengers Endgame. As I've said, Infinity War's great. It's kind of like the Lord of the Rings movies. All three movies, great stuff. Lord of the Rings is one of the greatest trilogies of all time. But if you have to pick a best of the best of them, it's got to be Return of the King. And a lot of that is because it is a satisfying, epic conclusion. And that's what Avengers Endgame is. A satisfying, epic conclusion. And of course, my favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe film. And there we have it. That is our Marvel month squashed down into a very long top 10 episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope if you like MCU, I hope if you like Marvel movies, you've enjoyed listening to these. I'm sure my list is different from yours, but we can all go back and rewatch them and really think, were those our favorites? Yes, they were. If you have never seen a Marvel movie, I hope this has intrigued you to maybe go and have a look. It's worth a look. If you hate them, but you're still here, then maybe you do want to watch it. Because boy, this was a long episode. And boy, you're still here. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I'll be back next week. I'm worn out, that's for sure. Who knows what I'll be talking about next week. It certainly won't be Marvel. We can put that down for a bit. Thank you for checking in. Thank you for listening. Thank you for enjoying a wonderful top 10 list. I love and appreciate you as always. Stay safe out there. Stay happy. Stay powerful. Stay whatever. Whatever you want to be, stay it. You've been spliced in later. Adios, muchachos. I'll catch you next time.